Wyoming Territory, August 1877. The sun was high and merciless when Renner Rhoades spotted her through the shimmer of heat rising off the plain's bare arms bound to a fence post, her back to a wind-beaten patch of sunflowers, her dress torn at the hem. She was not crying, not begging, just standing there still as a post herself, with her chin up and hair tangled from the wind. Renner reined in his horse. What the hell? He muttered under his breath. He had been riding south from Buffalo, heading toward his small spread near the Powder River after trading horses. He had not planned on stopping, but the sight of a woman tied out like livestock in an open field made his stomach clench. He swung down from the saddle and approached slowly, boots crunching in the dry grass. "Ma'am," she did not flinch. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, blue as glacier runoff and just as cold. "What happened?" he asked, voice low. She turned her head the barest movement. "I was punished." "For what?" "For speaking." Renner looked around. No house within sight, just fence, plains, and heat. "Who did this?" "My uncle," she said. "He says I am a disgrace." Renner stepped closer. Her wrists were raw where the rope had rubbed. She was maybe 20, 21, young but not a girl, strong in the jaw, proud in the eyes. He took out his knife. "I can cut you loose." She hesitated. "He will see it as defiance." "I do not give a damn what he sees it as." He sliced through the rope, catching her as she swayed. Her knees were weak from standing too long. She gripped his arm, then pulled away quick like she hated needing anyone. "What is your name?" he asked. "Junia Boone," he asked, recognizing the name now. "Your uncle runs the Boone Ranch near Red Butte." "Yes." Renner nodded grimly. "He is known for his temper." She crossed her arms, rubbing her wrists. "He says I shamed the family by refusing a marriage he arranged. The man was twice my age and cruel. I told him no." Renner stared at her, the heat pressing down on his shoulders. "So he tied you out here like a stray dog." Junia's jaw worked tight. "He says I am not worth more than a mule now." Renner looked at her, really looked at her. She was sunburned, proud, and not broken, not yet, but her pride was the only thing keeping her upright now. "Well," he said, loud enough for the wind to carry. "She belongs with me now." Junia blinked. "What? You heard me." He turned, grabbed her hand, and started walking her toward his horse. "You are not going back to that bastard." "I do not even know you," she said, stumbling a little. "You will," Renner said simply. "And you are safer with me than with a man who ties up women like cattle." She hesitated, then nodded once. He lifted her into the saddle, then swung up behind her and turned the horse south. They rode in silence for a while, the wind pushing at them like it wanted to send them back. But Junia sat tall in the saddle, even though her hands trembled. Renner's cabin was half a day's ride. He had built it himself 5 years back after giving up bounty work. He had not brought a woman there before. Not once. When they reached it, dusk was falling and the air was cooler. He swung down, then helped her dismount. "You can stay here," he said, opening the door. "No one will bother you." Junia stepped inside, eyes sweeping the place. It was small but clean, one bed, a table, a stove. She turned to him. "Why did you help me?" Renner met her eyes. "Because someone should have." That night, Junia sat on the edge of the bed, her hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee. Renner leaned against the wall, arms crossed. The lantern light flickered across her face. "You do not owe me anything," he said. "I know. You can leave when you want. Or stay, up to you." Junia looked at him. "Are you always like this?" "Like what?" "Quiet, serious, kind without smiling." He shrugged. "Not much to smile about most days." Something in her expression softened. "You live alone?" "I did." She nodded. "I will not be trouble." "I did not think you would." They sat in silence for a while. Then she said, "I used to dream about running away ever since I was a girl, but I never had anywhere to go." "You do now." She looked up at him. Do you mean that? Renner met her eyes. Yes. Junia stood, walked over, and pressed her hand to his arm. Thank you. He did not move, just let her lean into him for a moment. Then he reached up, gently brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. You can take the bed, he said. I will sleep by the stove. She nodded, though her hand lingered on his arm a moment longer than it needed to. Days passed. Junia stayed. She helped in the garden, mended shirts, learned how to feed the horses. She was quiet at first, watching him with wary eyes. But she laughed once when he spilled a pail of oats, and the sound surprised them both. Renner found himself watching her too, how she tied her hair back with a strip of cloth, how she hummed when she swept the floor, how she stood on the porch at dusk, like she was finally breathing. One afternoon, as they stacked firewood, she said, I am not going back. I did not expect you to. She looked at him, serious. I want to stay with you. Renner set the log down. Are you sure? I have never been more sure of anything. He stepped closer. This is not charity, Junia. If you stay, it is because you want to, not because you owe me. I want to, she said, because of you. Renner touched her face, slow and careful. Then you are mine, he said, and I am yours. Junia leaned in, pressed her forehead to his. Good, she whispered. Because I have never felt safe until now. He kissed her, gentle but certain. She melted into him like she had been waiting her whole life for someone to see her, not just help her, but choose her. And Renner, who had built his life with fences and silence, finally let someone in. Renner rose before the light caught the edge of the ridge, as he always had, though now the quiet in his cabin felt different. Not heavier, not lighter, just changed. He kept to his routine, washed at the basin, pulled on his boots, checked the horses. Junia still slept, her breath even, one arm curled beneath her head. Outside, the air held a bite that hinted at September. A pair of sandhill cranes wheeled overhead, their calls a thin cry against the pale sky. Renner studied the horizon. The Boone ranch lay far behind, but memory had longer reach than distance. When he stepped back inside, Junia sat at the table, brushing her hair out with her fingers. You always rise before the sun, she asked. Easier to think when the world's quiet, she nodded, eyes flicking to the window. I dreamed I was back there, couldn't move. I kept calling out, but no one came. Renner poured coffee into 2 tin cups. I heard you stir, he said. Wasn't sure if I should wake you. I'm glad you didn't. She took the cup he handed her, wrapping both hands around it. It passed once I opened my eyes. He sat across from her. You ever think about what you want now? Junia ran her thumb along the rim of the cup. I don't know what I want yet. I only know what I won't accept again. That's a good start. She gave a quiet laugh. It's strange. I'm used to being told what I want. Renner leaned back in his chair. No one here will do that. She looked at him a long moment. I believe you. Later that morning, Junia followed Renner out to the pasture. The fence needed mending along the south line, where windstorms had loosened the posts. She worked beside him, steady-handed, sweat lining her brow. He watched her, not the wire-taut sleeves rolled past her elbows. You ever fix fence before? He asked. No, but I watched the ranch hands do it enough. Renner nodded. You learn quick. I had to. Survival makes you pay attention. They worked in comfortable rhythm, the sound of hammering and the soft flapping of grass in the breeze the only noise between them. When they paused for water, she looked toward the ridge. Did you mean it? When you said I was yours. He took a moment before answering. I don't say things I don't mean. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. I've heard plenty of promises made easy. Most broke just as easy. Renner met her gaze. I don't make promises, I make choices. You staying here, that's a choice I'll keep making. Junia nodded, slow and sure. Then I'll keep choosing it too. By the time they finished repairing the fence, the sun had dropped low enough to cast long shadows. Renner led the way back to the cabin, their boots stirring dust across the path. He opened the door for her, the way he always did now, and she stepped inside without hesitation. That evening, Junia stitched a torn saddlebag while Renner sharpened his knife by the fire. The only sound was the scrape of metal on stone and the soft pull of thread through leather. "I used to think silence meant danger," she said. "Like something was about to go wrong." Renner set the blade down. "And now it feels like a place to start over." He didn't reply right away. Just looked at her, really looked, as if seeing not the girl who had stood tied in a field but the woman who had walked away from it. "You've got grit," he said. She smiled, faint but steady. "So do you." They didn't touch. Not yet. But when they turned in for the night, she laid her hand lightly over his where it rested on the edge of the blanket. No words. Just that skin to skin, steady and warm. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of something distant, harvest or rain. It was hard to tell. Inside, the silence held steady, not empty but full of what waited just ahead. The first frost came early. Renner stood by the corral at dawn, breath visible in the sharp air, watching the horses huff steam and stamp impatient hooves. The old gelding, Murphy, had started favoring his right leg. Renner filed it away in his mind, one more thing to tend before snow locked the valley in. Inside, Junia was quiet over breakfast. She stirred cornmeal into a pot slow, thoughtful. Her eyes weren't far off, just focused, like she was turning something over in her mind and hadn't decided where to set it down. Renner set his cup aside. "You thinking on something?" "I want to learn how to shoot." He didn't answer right away. The fire popped in the stove, and outside, a hawk gave a single cry before the silence swallowed it again. "You sure?" "I won't carry fear in my bones the rest of my life." Renner nodded once. "We'll start this afternoon." They walked out past the barn, where the ground still held a crunch underfoot. He handed her the smaller of his two rifles, a Winchester with a shortened stock. She tested the weight in her hands, then squared her shoulders. "Ever hold one before?" "No. Closest I got was watching my uncle polish his." He showed her how to brace the butt against her shoulder, how to breathe through the shot. Her first attempt missed the stump by a clean foot. She adjusted, fired again. Closer. By the fifth round, bark sprayed off the target in a neat burst. "Again," she said, reloading with a steady hand. Renner leaned against the rail. "You've got a good eye. I've got reason." When the cartridges ran dry, she wiped her hands on her skirt and looked out toward the ridge. "If he comes looking, I want to be ready." Renner didn't offer comfort. He knew better. Instead, he said, "He won't come this far, but if he does, he'll find you not the same as he left you." That night, after the fire burned down low, Junia watched the shadows stretch along the floorboards. Her voice was quiet but not uncertain. "I used to think I'd marry because it was expected, that I'd be given away like land or cattle. I never imagined choosing." Renner sat beside her, elbows on his knees, gaze on the dying coals. "I never figured someone choose me either," he said. She turned her head. "But I did." He looked at her then, really looked, the way he hadn't since that first day in the heat and dust. The bruises had faded. The girl who'd stood bound to a fence post was gone. What sat beside him now was a woman who'd lived through fire and come out sharper for it. He reached for her hand, slow and sure, and she didn't hesitate. When they lay down, it wasn't rushed or uncertain. She touched his shoulder like she was mapping something long familiar, and he held her with a reverence that made no promises, only presence. The lantern stayed unlit. The dark held them quiet, but not silent. In the weeks that followed, they moved like two parts of a wheel, each knowing the weight the other carried, neither pushing too hard. Junia took to the fields with a steel rake when snow first dusted the ground, clearing rows for winter cover. Renner worked the forge in the shed. shaping hinges for the new door she said the barn needed. No one told the other what to do. They just did what needed doing. One afternoon, she came in with a cut on her palm from handling fence wire. She washed it out at the basin while Renner stood behind her, drying his hands. "You don't flinch like you used to," he said. She met his eyes in the mirror. "Because I'm not waiting for permission anymore." He stepped closer, took her wrist gently, and wrapped the wound in clean linen. She watched him work, not speaking, but everything in her face said she trusted him to finish what he started. That night, as wind rattled the shutters, Junia pulled the quilt higher and curled against his side. "You ever want to leave this place?" she asked quietly. "No," he said. "But I'd go if you needed to." "I don't, not anymore." He kissed the top of her head and she let out a breath that settled deep. Neither of them said what it meant. They didn't need to. Outside, the sky stretched wide and black, stars sharp as flint. Inside, two people lay close beneath a roof they'd come to share, not by chance, but by choice. And the warmth between them didn't ask for more than that. The creek behind the cabin had thinned to a slow trickle by late October, its banks lined with frost-killed nettles and brittle grass. Renner stood with his boots sunk into the muddy edge, silvered water curling around his ankles as he pulled the last of the traps from the shallows. Muskrat mostly. He'd skinned them that evening and stretched the pelts before the cold hardened them stiff. Up the hill, Junia was on her knees in the garden bed, dirt under her nails, turning the soil over with a short-handled hoe. They weren't planting, nothing would take this late, but she said the ground needed loosening before the first real freeze. Renner had told her she didn't need to bother. She had only looked at him, then gone and fetched the hoe by dusk. She had come in carrying 3 eggs from the henhouse, her sleeves rolled and her cheeks flushed. Renner was at the table, sharpening a skinning blade, the muskrat pelts already pegged flat to the shed wall. She set the eggs in the basin and leaned against the door frame. "I saw wagon tracks crossing past the ridge," she said. "Not from you and not fresh." He looked up, blade paused mid-draw. "How far out?" "Close enough I could hear the iron rims on stone." Renner wiped the blade on a rag slow. "Could be someone passing through." "Could be," she said, but her face told him she didn't believe that. He stood, set the knife aside. "Finish up in here, I'll ride out in the morning." She stepped forward. "I want to come." "No," he said, firm but not harsh. "If it's nothing, there's no need for both of us. If it's something, I need you here." Junia's jaw set, but she didn't argue. Instead, she crossed to the stove, stirred the pot she'd left warming, and asked, "Will you be back by evening?" He nodded. Before nightfall. The next morning, he saddled the dun mare and took the rifle with the longer sight. Junia brought out a wrapped biscuit and tucked it into his saddlebag without speaking. He touched her wrist before mounting. "If you see a rider, stay inside. Lock the door." "I will," she said. "But I won't hide." He gave her a look, and she gave it right back. The ridge was quiet when he reached it. The tracks she'd seen were older than he expected, at least 2 days baked into the dirt. Wagon, yes, but not freight. Lighter wheels. Passenger rig, maybe. He followed the trail until it veered toward the creek bend, then lost itself in the brush. No fresh sign. By the time he turned back, the sun was slanting low and wind had picked up from the north. He pressed the mare into a trot, the cold biting through his coat. When he reached the cabin, smoke curled from the chimney and a candle burned in the window. He tied the mare and stepped onto the porch. Junia opened the door before he knocked. "You're late," she said. "Had to double back," he said. "Tracks were older than we thought." Whoever it was, they're long gone. No campfire ash, no scent of horses, nothing. She stepped aside and he entered, pulling off his gloves. "You see anything while I was gone?" Junia shook her head. "Just quiet." She brought him a steaming bowl of stew. He sat, the heat of the room settling into his bones. She watched him eat, arms folded, then sat across from him. "I got a letter," she said finally. Renner looked up. "From who?" "My cousin, Mary. She's in Cheyenne now, working as a seamstress. Says she heard what happened. Says my uncle's been telling folks I ran off with a thief." Renner's hand paused on the spoon. "You want to write her back?" "I did," she said. "Told her I didn't run. I walked." He gave a short breath of amusement, but she didn't smile. "She says he might try to come for me. Says he's talking about reclaiming what's his. He won't find you here." Junia looked down at her hands. "I'm not afraid of him anymore, but I hate how he still talks like I belong to him." Renner leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You belong to yourself." Her fingers curled around the edge of the table. "I know that, but I want more than just not being his. I want to be something of yours, too." He didn't speak right away. Then he reached across, took her hand. "You already are." Junia blinked, not from surprise, but from the weight of hearing it aloud. She stood, walked around the table, and sat beside him. He turned, pulling her close, and she rested her forehead to his cheek. "Then let's make it real," she whispered. "Not just staying. Not just surviving. Let's build something." Renner nodded against her hair. "We'll start with a second room. I'll cut lumber next week. I want a garden fence that keeps the rabbits out. And a new pan for the stove. One that doesn't tip." She laughed, quiet and warm. "And a name on the deed that's mine, too." He drew back enough to meet her eyes. "You'll have it. You'll have all of it." Outside, wind moved through the dry grass like a river in the dark. Inside, their hands stayed clasped, knees touching, plans spoken not in grand declarations but in the shape of tomorrow. They didn't need vows. They had sweat and frost, splinters and shared meals. And now, the start of something stitched from the same cloth as the land around them, rough, steady, and meant to last. The snow held off longer than expected, but when it came heavy. By early November, the ridge trail disappeared under a thick quilt of white, and the horses stood huddled in the lean-to, their breath curling like fog. Renner had banked extra firewood weeks earlier, and Junia had smoked the last of the late squash with sage and pine needles, stacking the jars neatly in the root cellar. They moved through their days deliberate, side by side, as though winter had slowed the whole world to a quieter rhythm. One morning, she found him fitting hinges to the new barn door, his sleeves rolled to the elbow, sawdust clinging to his forearms. He didn't look up when she stepped inside, but his voice carried. "Got a wire from Buffalo. Marshal's office." Man with Boone's description was seen asking questions at the general store. Junia leaned her hip against the post. "How long ago?" 3 days. "He's afoot now. Horse threw him somewhere between Casper and the Canyon Road." She ran her fingers along the grain of the wood. "He won't be able to reach us through this snow, not soon." Renner nodded once. "But he's trying. That tells me enough." She turned her head toward the loft ladder. "There's a scattergun up there. I saw it last week." "Uncle's not getting near you," he said. "I'm not worried for me." He looked at her then, something hard behind his eyes. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." "I'm not," she said. "But I won't ever let him think I regret walking away." That afternoon, they rode down to the trapline together, Junia bundled in the wool coat she'd sewn from the old Hudson blanket. They checked the snares in silence, the hush of snow absorbing the sound of the horses' hooves. No fresh sign. No movement. At the creek bend, Renner dismounted and studied the tree line. Junia stayed in the saddle, her eyes tracking the same spaces. After a while, he turned to her. "If you ever wanted to go back east, make a clean start, you'd have that choice." She slid down beside him. "I already made my clean start, right here." He reached for her hand without thinking, folding it into his glove, roughened palm. She didn't pull away. That night they didn't light the lantern. They sat near the stove, shadows flickering across the walls. Junia rested her head against his chest, her hair damp from melted snow. He held her gently, his thumbs sweeping across her collarbone. "I never thought I'd know peace," she said. "It's here. You built it." Before the first light, Renner woke to the sound of boots crunching outside. He rolled out of bed, rifle in hand, and Junia was already pulling her coat on beside him. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The door creaked under a sudden knock. Renner opened it with the rifle raised, steady. A man stood beneath the overhang, his coat stiff with frost, a limp in his right leg. His eyes, pale and bloodshot, flicked past Renner to Junia standing behind him. "You've got no right," the man growled. "She's blood." Junia stepped forward without hesitation. "You don't speak for me. You ran from your family, from your duty." "I walked away from a prison," she said. "This is my home now." Renner didn't lower the rifle, but he didn't have to fire. Boone's shoulders slumped under the weight of his own exhaustion. He looked smaller now, out of place in the cold. His voice cracked. "You think this man loves you? What can he give you? He's nothing." Junia stepped to Renner's side, her hand sliding into his. "He gave me freedom, kindness, a life." Boone's mouth opened, then closed. The wind caught his coat and flapped it back against his legs. He didn't speak again, just turned, limped back out into the snow, and disappeared into the trees. Renner shut the door behind him, bolting it quietly. Junia stood still for a long moment, then leaned her forehead against the wood. Renner stepped beside her. "It's done." She turned, wrapped her arms around his waist, and buried her face in his chest. "I don't want to look over my shoulder anymore. You won't have to." They didn't sleep the rest of that night. They sat near the fire and watched the snow fall, the silence between them no longer filled with waiting, but with the calm that follows decision. By the end of winter, the new room was finished. Junia lined the walls with shelves for herbs and dried goods. Renner carved a cradle from pine scraps, though they didn't speak of it aloud until one morning she rested his hand against her stomach and whispered, "I think we'll need more than shelves." He kissed her shoulder, then her neck, and whispered back, "Then we'll build whatever we need." They married in the spring. Not in a church, but beneath the cottonwoods by the creek, where the first green buds had started to swell, and the water ran cold and fast. Mary traveled from Cheyenne, bringing fabric and honey and an old ring that had belonged to Junia's mother. They said their vows with wind in their hair and mud on their boots, and Renner's voice didn't shake when he promised to stand beside her for all the days he had left. Junia didn't wear white. She wore blue, the soft kind that reminded Renner of the high prairie sky just before a storm breaks. Years passed and the cabin grew. A second cradle was built. Renner taught both children to ride before they could walk straight. Junia showed them how to plant and how to listen to wind and birds. The valley never filled with people, and they liked it that way. Peace held, quiet and steady, like the weight of a well-worn coat. They grew older together, not in leaps, but in the slow layering of shared days. And every night, when the fire crackled low and the children slept, Junia would curl beside Renner and rest her head in the same place it had always fit. They never spoke of the fence post again. Not because it was forgotten, but because it had been replaced by love, by choice, by a life made entirely their own.